notably one of the most acclaimed investigative reporters in the country. You're standard underachiever.
Going off today.
Right. A 40-year veteran of the Boston Globe, he was the paper's former Washington bureau chief and a founding member of its investigative spotlight team, which is the oldest investigative team in the country. He's won more than 25 national and regional awards, including the Pulitzer Prize on 3 occasions. And he's a graduate of Suffolk Law School in his spare time, and lives in Boston. So welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me on a misty, gray weekday afternoon. Have a great lunch, meet some new friends, and talk about this case that has sort of consumed me for a long time. The anniversary, when Patty called, asked me if I would come, she had the key to my castle. She somehow knew my daughter, who teaches 4th grade at the Deer Hill School. So I said, anything you want, Patty. I salute to the mother of my 3 grandchildren, so anything you need. So when my book came out, which I have a book, and if we have some time at the end, I'll have it for sale. When my book came out, I spent a whole year laboring on it. Back in 2015, it came out. I didn't like the bottom subhead. I wanted it to be Boston's Last Best Secret. And, but my publishers, being in New York, said, oh, that's far too parochial. But the reason I wanted to be Boston's Last Best Secret is because Boston matters to me. Having worked for the Globe Spotlight team, helped start it in the early 70s, we focused on stories that had more than headlines. They made a difference in how the city worked, improved government, even improved the church with the clergy abuse scandal that we did in the early 2000s. And that's what I felt this story had, a larger-than-life issue. It has been now, the actual theft took place on March 18th, 1990. It has been 34 years coming up that this case has been part of our newspaper headlines. Yet in the 34 years, not a single person has been arrested involving the crime, and nothing has been recovered. Understand what you're talking about. This is the largest art theft in world history, single art theft. There are 3 superlatives in that phrase. One, in the world. That's beyond Route 3 and even beyond Route 44. It's the world. So, the history for all time, not just this century and not the 20th century and the 19th. That's for all time. And the most valuable. What we're talking about, artwork that is stunning in its importance to art history. Oops. Allow me. There were, this is the museum, the front. It used to be in the old days, I think they used to have, Mrs. Gardner was a great Red Sox fan. And Fenway was built in 1912. This building was established, the museum was built in 1903. And these paintings, the most valuable ones, now valued at probably $500 million or more $1 billion, included these. This is a picture of she, a picture of she. When I was writing, I spent a lot of time at Boston Public Library, and I came down one time just to enjoy the sun, and I saw this is a statue to artistic achievement in the world. 8 artists there. 6 of them have their art on display at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. When it opened in 1903, it was the largest collection of artwork owned privately in America. And she had done it for what? For larger reasons than to show off to her Boston gentry, landed gentry. She had done it because she had traveled the world over with her husband for the previous 30 or 40 years. When she came to America, came to Boston in 1860, she was a New Yorker. And she married one of our most well-off, well-to-do, Jack Gardner, entrepreneurs. He had a shipbuilding, among other things, a company up in Beverly. When they had their first child, only child, and the boy passed away at an early age, her doctors said to him, you know, she's being far too morose for too long, grief-stricken, take her on one of your boats and begin to travel. And they loved travel. They traveled the world over, and they traveled, and she then got this appreciation, love, adoration for art. And as the years passed, she began to used her husband's millions and some of hers to buy the artwork of the ages. But in her travels, she came up with this transcendent idea, and the reason why that they decided to open a museum. And that idea was art survives. Everything in this expression, everything passes, art endures. And the civilizations, the art that she bought came from civilizations that had long ended, but they endured in history because of the art they produced. And that's what she wanted to bring to us in Boston, in Massachusetts. America was becoming a world power in the 1870s and 1880s. And, but it was all our, immigrant families weren't that much interested in art or appreciation of art. Well, having traveled the world over, she saw what art meant to a country, and she wanted to bring that appreciation and that inspiration for art to us. I'm getting a little afield from but let me carry on. So Jack Gardner passed away 1890s. She said, okay, it's time to build a museum. And when it opened in 1903, like I said, it was the largest collection owned by a private individual. The MFA hadn't been started around the corner from the Gardner Museum. And she really worked hard to get art that would be valuable to us as Americans, and she could get it on a little bit of a deal. She hired a Bernard Berenson. He was a Latin school graduate, which I always find, because I'm a Latin school graduate. But he spent his life I spent my life chasing three-alarm fires. He spent it buying art for the Gardner Museum. So, and when it opened, she had all of the greatest artists and thinkers and philosophers who were in Boston at the time came, and they had the symphony, Boston Symphony, playing for them as they came in. And she lasted another 20 years, but she established this credo for the museum. It'll be 2 provisos. It'll be free, and Boston kids, Boston school 8th graders, all will be traipse their way through the Gardner Museum. Now, I can tell you from own experience, 90% of us were bored silly. And, we're looking around, trying, when do we get out of here? And, but there were a few of us, and I can tell you that for certain. My father was a immigrant, survivor of the Armenian genocide, came to America in 1920. He could draw a straight line, and they sent him to art school. And he would go every day to his classes in the South End, And then every day he'd walk over from the south end to the museum, and he would study the art, study it, because you could get so close, and look at the artwork that he would be studying. This is I'm going to show some of the 13 pieces that were stolen. This is the most valuable. Vermeer's the concert. Vermeer, legend, you know, considered one of the greatest artists who lived. He did about 35 or 36. If there are any hard historians, you can correct me. But in this one, hung on the second floor, Dutch room. It was one of the 13 pieces that was stolen. What most people know who have any understanding of art is this painting here. This is Christ, is what I find most captivating. But again, I don't have my father's eye. It is Christ in the storm of the Sea of Galilee, Old Testament, New Testament scene described in the New Testament. And what people liked about it was this Christ here, and when you see it close, his face is total repose. All of his disciples in one state of panic or another. In Rembrandt, this is the only time Rembrandt painted the ocean, painted the sea. And I like to think of it, I like to think of it is because he got it. He hit it. He was right on the mark, right on the screws. And up top there, hope. And like I say, he loved this painting so much, he painted himself in there. Yeah. So let me see if I can get that right. Hold on one second. Oh, maybe it's right. Okay. So there were 2 large Rembrandts stolen. This is one of them, and like I said, it's the only time he painted the sea. And this is another, Lady and Gentleman in Black. They were a more traditional Rembrandt pose. And it was stolen, both of them, all 3 of those, with a couple of others, were stolen from the Dutch room on the second floor of the museum. And I see a few of you nodding. If you've been to the museum now, of late, let me jump ahead because I think it's an important idea. I'll go back into this as well. Whoopsie. This is part of my talk, when you go into the museum, you go into that room now where it had the masterpieces of the ages, and you see what it looks like now. I acquaint it with being the first person at there it is there, the first person at a wake. That there is where the Rembrandt Sea of Galilee, and this on the other side is the Vermeer. And to think of it being lost, these probably the most important possessions. I know Green Monster is an important possession. I know the Bobby Orr statute is, bring tears to our eyes. But this, we owned. She bought it for us to open our eyes, to get us to appreciate art. And that, to me, to go back to my original point of this was taken from us, that, to me, is the way to solve this case. In that, how do you do that? Well, the summer I was feverishly writing my book, and I was not on the beach. I was not on Manomet Beach, my favorite place to spend summer afternoons. I was down in my hovel of a basement, banging away on the typewriter, and I said, how do I convey the importance? Because the FBI has worked diligently. The Gardner has put a $10 million reward for the recovery, and that hasn't gotten, a single piece. How do you get this thing? And the summer of 2014 was the summer that all of our kids were pouring ice buckets over their head for the Ice Bucket Challenge. And they were doing that for a very important cause. Raise money for ALS research. In that research drive raised $80 million in 2 months. Wow. July and August of 2014 raised that, and it has now raised like $500 million. And just to get aside, and the reason I called the fellow who was behind the promotion, it was a BC, and he was a BC grandfather. His grandson had contracted that dreaded disease. And I said, I knew him from the Globe, and I said, Jerry, what's the deal here? Who's doing your promotion? He says, it's him, it's my grandson, and he's online, and he and another fellow just came up with this idea. And I thought to myself, this is the way. It's social media. It's having a campaign to get all of us involved. And the way I would put in front of these, and I'm going to get to the theft, stay with me, going to get to the juicy parts. How to get the $10 million? When I talk to my daughter's class, she says, Dad, don't go too far away from the $10 million reward. That's what they're here for. But I would put, and he's willing to do it, but the museum hasn't gone for it yet, Cardinal O'Malley. Not the FBI, not the museum. You know, we're all from the have part of, I think. There are the have-nots, and the have-nots know the secrets. And so we've got to convince the have-nots to come up with to feel obligated to ask a few questions and find out where it might be hidden. And I would say to have Cardinal O'Malley say the importance of this artwork to us, our city, and have, she put them on the wall for us. And when they're not there, our grandchildren don't see them. We might have seen them. My father dragged me up there to see these kids when I was a kid. And I went with my 8th grade class, but this is a sin. This is the spoiling. And if we're going to be, we're a city of champions. And if we're going to feel proud about that title, we got to get this back. Yeah. Feel that obligation for us. So let me go how the bad guys did get involved here. What happened was two men showed up in police uniforms around 1 o'clock in the morning on March 18th, 1990. And these are what they look like. The museum had, after Mrs. Gardner's death in mid-1920s, the museum went into sort of, she was a sprightly woman. She didn't really care about the politicians of Boston. Like, she didn't read that part of the paper. She cared about the finer things and the Red Sox. That's a woman who has my interest. But after she passed away, she required nothing could change in the museum. It had to stay as it was. There cannot be any, let's move the art from this room and move it to that room. Do I need a microphone? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll stay here. This works? Okay. Okay. Sorry. So they sort of sat on their hands when it came to fundraising. And they didn't, you've been on raising money for good causes, been on nonprofits, Feed the Hungry, House the Poor. You're on those boards to raise money because you've got an important responsibility. Well, these men, they were men who were on the Board of Trustees after her death, they didn't need to raise any money because the museum was built. It was stocked with the greatest art in the world. So they didn't really have to go out and raise money for new presentations. And as a result, the museum itself began to fray, I like to say. And by the mid-20th century, they hired their first security chief, and he came to work and he said, my first summer I realized we don't have central air conditioning. And the paintings were beginning to sweat during the mornings. So he says, that's not good for, you know, masterpieces. So I went to the board and I said, we need $500,000. And they went for that. They raised money, and I went back to him the next year. This is he talking to me, and he said, we need a fire alarm system, and that's going to cost another 50. And they said, we don't have it. We don't have the money. You have to raise it yourself. And he went out and raised it himself. But that showed the museum was more becoming threadbare by the mid-20th century. And he feared that there would be a fire that would get out of control, or a freeze of the pipes would burst. So he was worried. And they got to some of the security pieces, but they didn't address the security guards. The security guards, for the most part, were making minimum wage, which was really below $5 an hour. And they were ragtag. And on March 18th, 1990, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning, these two men, and there are only two, but those are the same men in the bottom two, but without the fake mustaches. They had fake mustaches. And they rang the doorbell, the side door of the museum, and there were two men on duty. One was a rock and roller who just 2 weeks ago passed away, Rick Abbott. And Rick knew that he's not supposed to answer anybody comes to the front door during your shift, overnight shift, he would go on at midnight and work until 7 in the morning. If anybody the handbook says, anybody comes to the door, rings the bell, you call the police and get the police there yourself. So Rick, and I had long interviews with Rick, and I said, well, why did you go to the door and let them in, hit the release button? And he said, I thought they were some hoodlums, some kids, hooligans. Remember, this is the few hours after our sacred holiday of St. Patrick's Day. And you know, St. Patrick's Day, the kids are out and they're doing hooliganism. That's even my generation doesn't use that, but you know what I'm talking about. They're just screwing around. And he said, that's what I thought, that some kids might have jumped in. He said, I had already done a tour. He had gone through the entire museum, 4 stories, had gone out back. He knew no one was out there. There was nothing going on that was problematic, but he thought some kids had jumped over the back fence and were in the back area of the museum. Not inside, but in the back. So he said, they must have been alerted by someone. The police must have been alerted, so they're there, and they're in police. They had a closed circuit TV system at the museum. I could see them. They were in police uniforms. That's what they look like. And so what am I supposed to do? I said, well, you're supposed to follow the handbook. Well, you know, everybody has their way of doing things, and I did it my way. So he hits the release button, and these two guys come in to his desk, and the desk looks something like this. Let's see, sorry. Maybe I did away with that desk. Yeah, here's the desk. So Rick is standing here. This is the back of the security desk here, and this is an old timer who was supposed to work that night but wasn't. And Rick has, this is a motion detector monitor. And Rick is standing here, and the two police officers come in from up here, and they stand where this old timer is standing here. And they say to him, who else is here? And Rick says, there's one other night watchman, he's doing the rounds. So call him down. So Rick has a two-way radio, calls the second night watchman down, and before he comes into the room, it's about 2 minutes or 3 minutes for him to come down. They say to Rick, Rick, you look familiar. We don't have an arrest warrant out for you, do we? And Rick says, no. Rick was not from Massachusetts. He had only been in Boston for, at that point, 2 years. You know, I'll show you a photo of Rick here. I mean, Rick could be mistaken for a hooligan. But Rick swears he didn't have any record, he was not wanted, but they said, well, come around from behind that desk and come out to where we can get a good look at you, because you do look like somebody we are looking for you, not for tonight, but just for another crime. So Rick says, to my interview with me, he says to me, I said, well, why did you follow their instructions? He said, well, I know by following their instructions. Right away, I knew this was not the right thing for me to do. And because, to go back to the desk, the museum had only one alarm, and that's right here. Only way Rick could have called the police throughout the museum was hit that alarm. There's no other way. So to remove him from behind there and to come out here, he knows he is abdicating on and sending out an alarm to the world. And I said to Rick, why then did you do it? He said, I knew I was stepping away from the alarm. I said, why? And take him, this is now 15 years ago, he points to his breast pocket. He said, I had a ticket to that night's Grateful Dead concert in Hartford, Connecticut, and I didn't want to lose it. When Rick told me that, I was the first person, and really the only person until I handed him over to CNN, that Rick would talk to me for 10 years. He didn't like one of my articles that I wrote in 2013 saying he's done all these suspicious things and he's never been questioned. They questioned him the next week. He didn't like that, so he broke off his relationship with me, but I still don't know. And he took the secret to his death. My sense is, you know, my feeling is that Rick didn't give it up purposefully. He passed 2 lie detector tests. He's good, smart kid. But he smoked so much dope. He was so under the influence. They had a New Year's Eve party at the museum 3 months before, New Year's Eve 1990. He invites 10 of his friends in, and he mixes up a concoction of mushroom soup or something, and they're all under the influence. And Rick said, you know, I sort of woke up at 2 a.m. and I said, oh, Jesus, what have I done? I shooed them all out. Then another friend comes at 4 a.m. Rick was irresponsible. No way he should have been having that responsibility in charge of the museum. And Holly said that she was getting to that, attending to that issue of the night watchmen or the guards not being quality people, not being professionals. But had not gotten to it. She had just taken over 6 months before. This theft to the security chief, to the other people, hardworking people who cared about the museum, loved the art, felt honored to work there, they were all done in by Rick's negligence / suspiciousness. And I, to this day, said, no way Rick did not do this without some involvement. My sense is Rick was a rock and roller. He had a band that played some of the seedier nightclubs in Boston, a couple in Brighton. And my sense is, and I got, as I did my work into trying to figure out who did it, I got to meet with some bad guys. And I learned that the bad guys knew of the vulnerability of the museum, of this museum, because they're night watchmen. Most of the museums were locked up tight and nobody was working during the night, excuse me. But this one was the sole one that had night watchmen. And I guess they didn't realize. My sense is, though, that someone might have met up with Rick, and Rick was he was always grousing, always griping. And we need to have more equipment, security equipment. And I think he may have said that to the wrong people at the wrong place. And Rick did not deny that he was, he was rubbing elbows with anybody who could sell him marijuana or cocaine. So my sense is that maybe he gave out a secret, or maybe he fell for a wink and a nod. I don't want to speak now ill of the dead, so I won't go on about Rick. But these two, they tie the two night watchmen up, they bring him downstairs, and then they spend another hour and more than an hour inside the museum. And then I started to figure out why, this was when I was on, it was 10 years ago. Why would you do this? Well, you can't sell a Rembrandt. It's not like putting on a Vermeer. There's no way. First, it's stolen, and no one is going to buy it from whomever you're selling it to. So I said, well, maybe it's a Mr. Big. Maybe there's some criminal enterprise controlled by an art appreciator, and he or she wants to put the art on the walls. And but as I dug into how they stole the artwork, I let that go, and this is what I'm talking about. That's a Boston police detective the next day going through all of the paintings. They stole about 5. The major work they took from the Dutch room, and all of the glass fronts were smashed. The frames were broken, and in the 2 large Rembrandts, the one at his backside and the one to his left, the Rembrandts were with box cutters cut out of their stretchers. And then it hit me. If I'm going to commission these ragtag hooligans to try to steal the art of the ages, I don't want this artwork coming back to me damaged. So there had to be some other reason for this theft. And as I dug deeper into in my work at the Globe didn't do organized crime. We had terrific Kevin Cullen, Shelley Murphy. They didn't need Steve Kirkson to do organized crime. I did political and white collar crime. So, but as I delved into it, I got to be chummy with the bad guys and understand this theft took place at a critical time in Boston's criminal underworld. The Angiulo family, which had controlled Boston organized crime since the 40s, had been taken down by a federal indictment in 1985. And that set off a war between 2 gangs, one that was close to the Angiulos and another was close to a guy named Frank Salemi. Bad guy, mobster, And bodies started mounting up. And as I learned in my reporting, both families, both crime gangs, knew of the vulnerability that the museum was open to theft, was vulnerable to a theft. One of them was headed by this guy here, Vinnie Ferrara. These are just some of the sketches that were also stolen. Vinnie Ferrara is the man on the left, handsome guy, grew up in North End, went to Latin school, went to BC Knights, smart, and he fell in with the wrong crowd when he got later in his teens and was making a lot of money as a gangster, as a racketeer. And that life lasted for about 10 years for him, and he got arrested for racketeering in November of '89. And that summer of 2014 that I'm banging away on my typewriter, not getting on the beach, what a summer, I get a call. I reached out to, I had heard Vinnie was interested in solving this crime. I couldn't figure out why. So I made a call to his lawyer, who was also a Latin school graduate, and I use this, give you a hint of how we do our magic. Mostly it falls right between the, right between the boards. But sometimes you hit upon a person who knows your name or knew your mother, has a friend of your cousin, and that's what it was with this lawyer. And he was a Latin school grad, and we started chit-chatting about Latin school and blah, 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 blah. And he says, yeah, I know Vinny's asking about this. Vinny's asking about the crime, but I couldn't tell you why, and I wouldn't tell you why. But I will send me a letter, and I'll get it to Vinny. I said, okay. So around late May, early June, I get a call at my home in Manamet. And it was not my cell phone, it was my regular phone. So it has no identifier. I can't say, hi, Steve Kirkcher. Says, you're doing something on the Gardner Museum? I says, yeah. He said, I don't want to tell you my name. I said, fine, fine, fine. He said, well, I want to tell you about Vinnie Ferrara, but I want to be identified as an intermediary. Whatever you want to be, just tell me what you know. He said, well, Vinnie Ferrara was in jail after being arrested in November of '89, and he was visited in jail by his best friend and his driver, Bobby Donati. Bobby Donati is on the right, is the man on the right. I haven't been able to identify the man in the middle. But Bobby Donati has long been thought of as having been involved in the theft, but no one can figure out why. And I will tell you why. Bobby Donati pulled this off in order to get Vinnie Ferrara out of jail. And I said, well, I didn't know Vinnie was in jail. He said, look it up. I'll wait for you to look it up, and I did. I says, you're right, he got arrested 4 months before he had been arrested. He was still in jail when the theft went down. And he says, right, Bobby Donati stole this art to get Vinnie out of jail. And I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, you don't know this because you haven't lived the life of Vinnie Ferrara. But Vinnie Ferrara knew that Bobby Donati believed that artwork like this majestic art, is a free pass to get someone out of jail. Get out of jail free card. What's the Monopoly term? Get out of jail free. That's what it is. I said, what are you talking about? I don't know this. He said, well, you got to do your homework. So I did my homework, and my homework led me back to this guy here. Any of you who've read the papers for the last 50 years and have lived on the South Shore, that might be a familiar face. Guy named Miles Connor. Miles was a ne'er-do-well, but liked fine art. And Miles and Bobby Donati were friends. Bobby was, common criminal. And Miles had a rock and roll band, and he also had some luck with stealing art. One of the places they stole out of was a place up in Maine, the estate of the Woolworth family up in Maine. And Donati somehow had learned, and this is something that happened in the 70s, Donati had learned that the estate was closed until the summertime. That May of 1973, Donati and Miles break in, and they steal 5 Wyeth paintings. Wyeth is an important artist. And I got this part of it, I got confirmed by Miles. They come back to Boston, and Miles, they're going to hold on to it for a year or two. Well, Miles he's an Action Jackson guy, so he finds someone who he thinks he can fence the Wyeth paintings with. This is 1973. He's going to do a handoff, sell them to the fence in the shopping lot, the lot of the Mashpee Shopping Center. I'm not sure exactly where it is. He was going to play in a rock and roll, in a bar in Mashpee. That's that night. That's why he had the handoff to be at this Mashpee parking area. Well, he gets the paintings out of his back of his trunk, and he brings it over to the fence, and the fence turns out to be not a fence, but an FBI undercover. And he gets arrested, as he should have gotten arrested. So this is Miles being brought into Norfolk Superior Court for his arraignment. that morning, the next morning. And this is where I don't believe this part of the story, but Miles tells me, as I'm walking in, one of the state cops yells to me, "You're going to need a Rembrandt to get you out of this, Miles." Puts the idea in his head. He gets bailed. He's going to come back for another hearing. And when he's bailed, he works out a scheme. I'll get my gang and we'll go into the MFA, Museum of Fine Arts, and we steal a Rembrandt. And they do. They go in with guns, you know, and they take a Rembrandt off of the wall and they escape. And I'm not sure where he puts the Rembrandt. He tells me one of his bum friends in Medfield had it. Another person tells me, no, it was under the mother of a girlfriend of one of his gang members in the North End. I like that idea. That has a more smack of verisimilitude for Miles. Well, Miles is just a kid gone wrong, but he's not hurting people, he's stealing art. But why does Miles steal that painting is because he waits a year. And in the winter of '74, he calls his lawyer, Marty Leppo, a great criminal lawyer, and he says, "Marty, tell the FBI if they'll go easy on me on my main theft on the Wyeth, I will go easy with them. I'll bring them back the Rembrandt." And Leppo says to him, "Well, I don't know you think they'll do that?" And he says, "Well, a state cop yelled to me, you're going to need a Rembrandt, and I got the Rembrandt." So Leppo shrugs his shoulders, calls the FBI, and the FBI says to Leppo, "Tell him if he has that painting, bring it back, and he can explain it all to the judge. But we're not carrying his water." So that's what happened. Miles goes into the court and tells the judge, I was able to get my hands on the painting. I gave it back, and I've done it as a good gesture to return art to the walls of the MFA. But I would like to get good consideration on this other theft in Maine. The judge doesn't believe. Says 8 years for Maine, 8 years for the MFA. Leppo says, "I almost passed out." He says, because he said, "I thought it was a pretty good idea," but he lets him serve the term as a one 8-year sentence. Out of that, whenever I talked to the bad guys, all of them said, "It's a get out of jail free card. It's a get out of jail free card." And that's why I think that what that person who wanted to be called an intermediary told me. I gave that to the FBI. I don't know if they've called in Ferrara to get his version of events. I never got disputed by anybody on this account, but a couple of years ago, I got. This is one more mystery I'll tell you about. This is a frame of a painting called Chez Tortoni, and that is this painting here. Shoot, I thought I had Chez Tortoni here. No, I guess I don't. Well, this fellow here came to me about 4 years ago, Paul Calantropo. He was a jeweler. Grew up in Everett, had a jewelry building had an office in the jewelry building in Boston, and he tells me on the record, which means that's a pretty big step to be on the record. Most people in these stories are off the record, want to be on background or an intermediary, but Calantropo was willing to be on the record. He says that 2 months after the theft in 1990, Donati came into it. He knew Donati from growing up in Everett. Donati came into his office in the jeweler's building and took something he was holding was like a white cloth was on top of it. took the white cloth off, and it was this. That is a finial. And we have flag, no, this. Most flag poles will have a finial. Most of them are round, but some of them are like this. But this finial is truly exquisite. This flag pole, and that held this banner here. And it's a Napoleonic banner. That was carried by Napoleon in the Russian campaign. So this is valuable piece. They wanted to, the thieves wanted, this is not in the Dutch room, this is in called the Short Gallery. It's one room away from the Dutch room. And they wanted to get the tapestry, but they couldn't get at it. Let me see if I have a photo of it. They could, yeah, there it is there. And this is the morning after, so you see that the I can't see it, at the top, just where the light wood shows, that's where the finial was. And they wanted to get they wanted to get that banner. And the banner was held in place by 8 small screws. They got 6 of the screws out. They didn't get the other 2. And so they go up on a little settee, they got a little bureau there, they jump up on there, and they take the finial. And then they come down from there, and they come upon one frame that has 5 Degas sketches. And they smash that. Let me see if I get that. No, this here is the Chez Tortoni. So this is the final anecdote. This painting by Manet, which 2 people have come up to me in my years of talking about this, and they've said to me, Steve, that's a different painting than the other paintings that they stole. That's not a grandiose painting. That's a more personal painting. There's a reason why someone wanted that for a different reason than get out of jail free. So, well, what do I know? I don't know anything. So I say, well, that's interesting because the room that was stolen out of, first floor, everything else is in the second floor. The museum had what is called a motion detector equipment that was registering the sensors within the door jambs of the entry and exit out of every gallery. And this was in a room called the Blue Room. And the motion detector equipment and transcript, it doesn't show anybody being in the Blue Room. The last person who had been in the Blue Room that night of the theft was Rick, the rock and roller. So it has raised in my mind and continues to raise. Why didn't that, if the bad guys went in that room to go for the Manet, why aren't their footsteps showing up on the transcript? And that's what this is. That's the machine there. Let me see if I can pull it up. There it is. There it is. This is the transcript. March 18th, 5 minutes of 2. Someone's in the Dutch room. Someone's in the Dutch room. Some say someone's in the Short Gallery. None of them say someone's in the Blue Room because maybe no one was in the Blue Room. But that painting was stolen. And while every other frame of every other piece that is stolen is left exactly where it had been hanging, the Manet frame was left on the chair of the security director. That is it. Right in behind Rick's office, where Rick was. So, and to me, You know that old expression? Rick did not have a perfect relationship with. So, you know, we wrote about Rick in a sort of a positive way, that he had worked hard, and there was trouble that he had been somehow implied that he had been involved in this theft. Well, he told me any number of times, I know why people think of me suspicious. And he said twice that he had passed lie detector tests. So I'm still not convinced that Rick didn't take with him now to the grave a secret. So, you know, all this time later, if you haven't seen the 4-part series that's been on Netflix called This Is a Robbery, I'm a little bit, you know, a little bit back and forth on telling my story, which is too bad, because the story is such a powerful story. And again, it says so much about us, so much about the Hevs, that they would let this beautiful artwork be so vulnerable. And it should say something about us, that we would do anything we can to, and the museums try. They have a security director who has worked valiantly on the case. They have put a $10 million reward. Again, $10 million, my daughter will say. So it's an extraordinary story. I think, yet people don't know it. I would want it to be made into a movie. It would be good for my bank account, but also because this story says so much about the haves and the have-nots. And Boston has changed. We are not the city we were in 1990. With omerta, you know that expression, hush, hush, you don't say anything, don't say anything. Omerta is no longer part of our, you know, if you see something, you say something. And so much of that changed with what happened in 2013 with the marathon bombing, and how Boston sort of rallied to the victims in trying to catch the bad guys. That's what I would like to have happen here. But the only way to do it is to promote it. I'm promoting it as best I can, but I would like them to start this social media campaign and do it. Like I said, the Cardinal is willing to do it, but they haven't got any callbacks from the FBI of late. So.